Huh? Grr, that's not fair at all. Stupid rich people always get the help. Nah, I'm so angry, it's just not fair.
Whoa, calm down, short bus. Why are you so angry?
It's those sort of rich people. They keep saying tax cuts are good. It's all over Twitter.
What? You're looking at Twitter again? Oh no, short bus, what have you read this time?
Look what Sally McManus said.
Big business now has too much power as a result of trickle-down economics. They are using their wealth and power to influence governments, push for more privatizations, and even take rights off workers.
Yeah, bloody big business.
Oh no, we already talked about Mr. McManus, don't you remember?
That's not all. Have a look at what Ronald Swan said.
Trickle-down Turnbull's $65 billion tax cut robs Australia of public health, education and services, where 65% of Australians would rather see it spent.
See? The Prime Minister wants to steal from people.
Oh no, really? Do you know what stealing is, short bus?
Of course I do. I'm not stupid. Yeah, there's more.
Trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's just made the richer even richer, and working people were left behind.
Why do they want to steal from poor people, Matty? Why?
Ah, boy. You know taxation is actually stealing. Cutting taxes is really just letting people keep more of their own money.
But Ronald Swan said tax cuts are stealing.
Yeah, he says lots of really silly things. You know what taxes are, right?
Aren't they, the price we pay for living in a civilized society?
Oh no, what else have you read today, mate?
I'm just so angry.
Short bus, it's time for another chat. Trickle-down economics is the greatest broken promise of our lifetime. We're being sold the Trickle-down Economics con. Trickle-down economics is wrong, says IMF. Trickle-down economics, 4 reasons why it just doesn't work. These are just some of the headlines the left-wing press has served up over the years. Trickle-down economics is bad, they claim. It only helps the rich, they say. But what is so-called trickle-down economics? Investopedia defines it as follows. Trickle-down economics, or trickle-down theory, argues for income and capital gains tax breaks or other financial benefits to large businesses, investors and entrepreneurs in order to stimulate economic growth. The argument hinges on 2 assumptions. All members of society benefit from growth, and growth is most likely to come from those with the resources and skills to increase productive output. This is reflected by Wikipedia. Trickle-down economics, also referred to as trickle-down theory, is an economic theory that advocates reducing taxes on businesses and the wealthy in society as a means to stimulate business investment in the short term and benefit society at large in the long term. So it's basically the idea that money will trickle down to poorer parts of society if the wealthier parts are allowed to keep more of theirs. I can see why the left hate it so vehemently. There's only one problem. It doesn't actually exist.
What do you mean it doesn't exist?
Hold up, mate. I'm getting to it. The term actually originated way back in the Great Depression. A comedian called Will Rogers used something similar in order to describe President Herbert Hoover's attempts at stimulating the economy. The money was all appropriated for the top in the hopes that it would trickle down to the needy. Mr. Hoover didn't know that money trickled up. Give it to the people at the bottom, and the people at the top will have it before night. Anyhow, but it will at least have passed through the poor fellow's hands. The thing is, Herbert Hoover never actually lowered taxes. He did the exact opposite. The Revenue Act of 1932 raised United States tax rates across the board, with the rate on top incomes rising from 25% to 63%. The estate tax was doubled, and corporate taxes were raised by almost 15%. Taxable items including dye, chewing gum, furs, soft drinks and sporting goods, firearms, shells and cartridges, coal, coke and copper ore, telegraph, telephone, cable and radio dispatches, and checks, jewellery, matches, refrigerators, stamps, and toiletries, and this act enacted one of the first taxes on gasoline. So rather than cut taxes, he actually increased them substantially, almost certainly turning what was a severe downturn into what we now know as the Great Depression. Made even worse when Franklin D. Roosevelt embarked on a series of so-called reforms, including spending a great deal of money on a lot of things, cleverly named the New Deal, as though governments using borrowed money to buy votes was somehow a new concept. Anyway, tax rates in the United States stayed quite high through the Depression and World War II, although very few people paid top rates due to a range of deductions and the bracket they were set at. Taxes remained high until Ronald Reagan took office in the early 1980s, while America was in the grip of another severe recession. This is when the term trickle-down economics enters popular vernacular, not as an economic theory, but as a political attack on President Ronald Reagan, more specifically, his tax cuts.
The committee bill offers a 15% cut over 2 years. Our bipartisan bill gives a 25% reduction over 3 years. Now, as you can see by this chart, there is the 22% tax increase. Their cut is below that line, but ours wipes out that increase and with a little to spare. And there it is, as you can see, the red column. That is the 15% tax cut, and it still leaves you with an increase. The green column is our bipartisan bill, which wipes out the tax increase and gives you an ongoing cut.
Reagan cut taxes across the board dramatically. His goal was to bring more goods and services into the American economy by giving people more of an incentive to produce. His political opponents responded by attacking him as being some sort of lackey for the rich. This just wasn't the case. As founder and president of the Heritage Foundation, Edward Fulner notes, Reagan's 1981 Economic Recovery Tax Act was an across-the-board 25% reduction in tax rates. Everyone got tax relief. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 was quintessential Reagan. He knew closing loopholes and lowering rates would create efficiency gains. No one thought it could be done, but the legislation passed, reducing the number of tax brackets to 2, 15% for middle class and 28% for the wealthy. As a result, the highest income tax rate fell from 70% to 28%, one of the biggest tax reductions in American history. So Reagan cut taxes for everyone, so long as they were already taxpayers. As for the economy, it boomed. It boomed because people had more of an incentive to work, invest, and produce. It was the boom in investment and production that saw the economy grow, not because money was trickling from rich to poor. Money doesn't trickle. It flies around all over the place. Not only did Reagan's tax cuts result in an economic boom, they saw a rise in tax revenues because of something called the Laffer curve. This is a theory developed by one of Ronald Reagan's advisors called Arthur Laffer. The Laffer curve is a simple but insightful idea based on two obvious and proven facts. First, for obvious reasons, tax rates set to 0 will generate no revenue. Second, rates set at 100% will produce zero income because if rates are at 100%, nobody will work. The trick with setting tax rates is to find the optimum level. That's the level that generates the most income without being too much of a disincentive to work. It's not the point of this video to discuss the optimum rate, but it's certainly relevant to the discussion of whether or not tax cuts are effective ways of boosting economic growth. In the case of Ronald Reagan, they certainly were. This was entirely predicted by real economists as well.
We do have evidence, however, that the level of taxation and the rate of economic growth are inversely related in general. No question about that.
The US in the 1980s is just one example. It is a fact that low taxes, low regulations, and free market economies benefit the poorest people in society. The more economic freedom a nation has, the better it is. After all, if you have 1% of a cake and the size of the cake doubles, so does your own slice. This also means the gap between the biggest slice and the smaller slice doubles, but everyone gets more cake. So what is trickle-down economics? Does it actually exist? Thomas Sowell answers this question in his thesis, Trickle-Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich. No such theory has been found, even in the most voluminous and learned histories of economic theories, including J.A. Schumpeter's monumental 1260-page History of Economic Analysis. Yet, this non-existent theory has become the object of denunciations from pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post to the political arena. It has been attacked by Professor Paul Krugman of Princeton and Professor Peter Corning of Stanford, among others, and similar attacks have been repeated as far away as India. It is a classic example of arguing against a caricature instead of confronting the argument actually made. So trickle-down exists in the sense that it's a term people use. What doesn't exist is a formulated economic theory called trickle-down economics. There just is no such thing. It's nothing more than propaganda designed to discredit supply-side economics, which is an economic theory holding that bolstering an economy's ability to supply more goods is the most effective way to stimulate economic growth. This is exactly what Jean-Baptiste Say explained when he wrote about the law of markets. Economies grow by producing more and better goods and services. When governments lower excessive tax rates and deregulate industry, they incentivize production while simultaneously making it easier to produce. This isn't some pie-in-the-sky economic theory with no solid evidence to back it up, such as other so-called economic theories. Are you talking about me? Supply-side economic theory and the law of markets have been proven time and time again, because, as should be obvious, in order to consume something, you first need to produce it. Duh!
This is outrageous! The worst thing I've seen all day!
What is it now, short bus?
New Zealand has more economic freedom than Australia!
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? At least we beat them at the cricket.
Yeah, silly Kiwis!
Around, but I've got the feeling as a big ex-Victorian skipper, we're going to bowl an underarm. We ever believed it? And that's a disappointing finish. Disappointed Brian affecting the crowd.
Hi everyone, thanks as always for watching my content. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a little thumbs up and a comment down below. If you haven't seen my content before, go check it all out. Click the subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell so you get those notifications. There's a PayPal link in the description if you ever want to leave a donation just to say thank you for the content. No obligation whatsoever. It is up there completely for free for you, and hopefully I'll see you around.